I'm Rick Carter. I was a production designer on Forrest Gump, and I'm going to give you a one-scene breakdown of when Bubba and Forrest come to Vietnam. My process, I would guess, is as a collage artist. I do little sketches. I do a lot of research. For this particular movie, this was reflective of my own life and times. I'm basically Forrest's age. So I knew about the era that we told the story of, the Vietnam era, the Civil Rights era, growing up in the 60s. The first thing is that you're getting a wide view of what you think is rice paddies and the silhouette of the Hueys. The Hueys are very iconic. You immediately know that you're in Vietnam. The first thing that I would say about this frame is that it's an iconic image from Vietnam because it basically gives you the silhouette of the Huey. And Dale Dye, who was the military advisor on this, he's the one who helped us set up the camp to be exactly the way it would be in this kind of context. All of this kind of propage that you see here, or the equipment that they have here, every aspect of this is based upon the way it would be in a real camp in Vietnam, because Dale Dye had that experience. He'd also been the advisor on Platoon and a number of movies that portrayed the Vietnam War up to that point. I think the main part that makes you feel like you are in a place that could be Vietnam is basically the horizon here of what you think is rice fields. These are not really rice fields. This is a delta that actually floods so that it actually has this kind of a look. But the idea was to keep it very simple.
Now, they told us that Vietnam was going to be very different from the United States of America, except for all the beer cans and the barbecue. It was.
The joke is that it looks like it could be a barbecue in South Carolina, because that's actually what it is. Once we found where we could build Forrest's house, then we had to branch out from that area. Fortunately, we were able to find places even close to where the house was, and then many others in that local area that we could stage as Vietnam. So Forrest and Bubba have now landed, and now we're in the camp, and what's the first thing you see is the ultimate product placement in Vietnam. Coca-Cola, Budweiser, Falstaff beer. And we've got a very basic situation here where we're setting up things that you can identify with as an audience as little tableaus. You know, the barbecue, the card game, the beer, the hanging out, and these walkways which basically take you throughout the scene, because this part would all be flooded. And then in the background, in addition to this, was just like, I think this is one of the outhouses with the water that would filter down here, is to actually then have these helicopters going through. So there's a lot of activity in the frame, but all of these, this one and all of these, are actually put in later with computer graphics. So we had to actually bring in palm trees to the battlefield and this set so that there was more that would convey that tropical feeling of being in Vietnam. And that's a big deal, actually, because you've got to bring in, you know, full-scale palm trees on either forklifts or a crane, and then dig around for the base to get them in there and to make sure that they're going to stand up. One of the things that is very important in scenes like this is to give a sense that this isn't designed, that it actually is a place that you really would see people in an organic way. I am immediately drawn, of course, to the characters, but also this sign here. It's something that's said specifically later. Forrest says, I may not know a lot, but I think that we had some of America's best young men here, along with all the, you know, just the setup of the camp with the, you know, you've got the tents and you've got the radio here. So everybody you know as a tableau on one level or another is actually relating to something, whether it's something they're eating, drinking, playing, or in this case, listening to music. And remember, in this sequence, you're hearing music in the background. So that radio is actually giving you a source for that music that you're actually hearing. This is all, as you've noticed so far, from their point of view as they move forward. So it's personal to us. You're just moving into the scene towards the first encounter with someone who's going to be as important as Lieutenant Dan is to Forrest and to us.
You just shrimp all the time, man. So much shrimp on it, you can't believe it.
Right side there. You must be my FNGs.
The most important thing in this frame is this. is the toilet paper. Now, this is pretty important, too, because that cigar sets up Lieutenant Dan's character. But the toilet paper gives him urgency. I mean, literally. And now, the first thing out, he comes upon these two guys. And this is the introduction, obviously to Forrest and Bubba. But the things that are really the details here are the cigar, the toilet paper, his dog tags. And I think that that's what makes that shot actually work. The rest of it is, you're in a camp.
There is one item of GI gear that can be the difference between a live grunt and a dead grunt. Socks.
I'm very aware as a production designer that the reason people go to movies is who's in it and what's it about. And the background actually is the background. And if you know that people are working hard to create a background, that takes you out of the movie. So actually it's a magic trick to do something that people don't notice because it feels like it's the right thing to be there. It just happens to be the exact right place for those scenes to take place. Otherwise, it could look like this. It could just be a blank wall. But everything you see in the frame is actually either going out somewhere or putting something there. Sometimes it's a small detail. It could just be this guy reading the Hot Red magazine, having a beer. We do certain things. We might bring in this palm tree. We bring in this tropical foliage. But really the idea is to give an overall feel with the vehicles, the movement, the people, that you are somewhere that you believe you're supposed to be.
He was from a long, great military tradition. Somebody in his family had fought and died in every single American war.
So this is a 4-shot montage to depict what Forrest knows later about Lieutenant Dan. The simple way to do that, of course, is number one, to have the person who is dying in each war look like Lieutenant Dan, because it's played by the same guy. But he's also falling in the ground in iconic locales that you actually could recognize as being part of the war that people would actually know about sort of through collective memory. This would be Valley Forge. Washington crosses the Delaware in the winter, and that's why it's snow. These are just actually shot, as it turned out, on a rooftop with 4 different tableaus where Gary could then fall into and actually die the 4 times that he does when he's representing his ancestors. We move on to the next American war, which is the American Civil War. And Lieutenant Dan is a northern fighter, and he's dying. There's a cannon down in here. In this scene, you've got World War I, and you've got the mud of the trenches and the battlefields in France, and you've got always indications that there's other people around who've died, even though these are very, very quick hits. This is a flamethrower. There was a lot of interesting propage that went in just to give you a little hit, but none of it is actually designed to look absolutely real. In this frame, it gets closer, and it's a bit, in a sense, more personal, dying on the beach, D-Day. It's probably a stunt pad underneath this, as I remember, so that he can fall, but you don't want everything to shake like that. It was a very simple setup, and it was actually, I think, all of these were done at night. It's a succession of images that are not designed to be so heavy that it takes you out of the movie. It's a part of Forrest's memory to tell you this, but it's actually something he could never visualize other than this kind of very simple way, like you're almost looking at a textbook of somebody telling you that we fought in 4 wars. What did they look like?
You boys are hungry. We got steaks burning right over here. 2 standing orders in this platoon. 1, take good care of your feet. 2, try not to do anything stupid.
Lieutenant Dan's gotten to where he needs to get, and it's a place that's totally open. At the center of this camp, all the privacy, is broken down between everybody, and that's part of this whole scene, which is these guys are all becoming friends. We have the graffiti in the background. I remember this flag here as the Viet Cong flag. So, Lieutenant Dan's point of view would be that belongs on the outhouse. Then we have actually a Southern flag back here. In this type of case, because we have so much research, we can get photographs of what things look like and then make them look very real to what they would have looked like, particularly in this case. So we do a lot of construction. I don't personally do most of the drawings at all. There's great people who know how to do that. And then the carpenters are fantastic at being able to follow those and make it come alive. And the painters bring it alive to make it look like it's old and it's got the graffiti and the touches. It's really a step-by-step design process from an idea to then sketching it up, then drawing it up to something that could be built, and then laying it out in a location or on a sound stage or perhaps in the digital realm if it's CG. And that's essentially the components that go into the production design. So after we've left the camp, this is our first major establishing shot. We're following the river. We're continuing on our path through Vietnam, through Forrest's life. And what we did is, of course, we brought in the extras and the cow, and the people are all here. And all this is brought in to look like it's part of the farming. Everything from here on up is actually digital. So this is actually a village that was constructed by ILM in the computer, as were the mountains that give you a type of topography that actually looks like a part of Vietnam. And overall, it's basically now bringing you out from the position that we were in, which was a very intimate entrance into a camp. And now when you get out into this shot, you're in the real country of Vietnam. Water is basically this metaphor for the reflection that the entire story is, because it's a reflective story about a personal life and a cultural history, and the river or water runs through it. You see it at Forrest's house, you see it at Washington, D.C., and throughout Vietnam and all the sequences, there's kind of a sense of being by and on the river of life to tell this story. And so here it is in this particular shot right here. So that's just a one scene breakdown for Forrest Gump. It's one small part of obviously a big canvas that tells the story of Forrest through those life and times. Every single shot is created with the idea to tell a story, and this is just one part of it.